The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
We hope a few moderate Democrats with some common sense will step up to the plate and do the right thing to vote to open the federal government.
The shutdown drags on. The new tactics Senate Republicans put on the floor today to fund parts of the government.
They also said they're going to behave. We're going to find out if they behave. If they behave good, if they don't behave, we'll take care of it.
Plus, President Trump issues a new threat to Hamas, what he is calling for as the tenuous ceasefire hangs in the balance. And then contaminated cinnamon, the new warnings by the FDA, which brands are now added to elevated lead list. Good evening. I'm Taylor Murray. Welcome to the National News Desk, America's News Now. A big announcement from President Trump this afternoon that will make fertility drugs more affordable for American families and expand access into in vitro fertilization. The Trump administration has reached a deal with pharmaceutical company EMD Serono to lower the cost of their popular Gonal F drug, which treats infertility in both women and men.
For years, American couples struggling with infertility have faced crushing costs in their quest to start a family, and IVF is among the most expensive treatments of all. A single round of IVF in the United States can cost up to $25,000, can actually go a lot higher than that, and many couples require multiple rounds for a successful pregnancy.
EMD Serono is pledging to provide massive discounts to most of the fertility drugs they provide in the U.S., meaning the cost of drugs for a standard IVF cycle could decrease somewhere between 42% and 79% for families. Breaking news this evening, former Trump national security advisor from his first term, John Bolton, has been formally indicted in a probe into mishandling classified documents. He is charged with 18 counts of illegally storing and transmitting classified information. This is a breaking story. We will update you with much more on air and online at thenationalnewsdesk.com. President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke today, laying the groundwork for an upcoming one-on-one meeting in Budapest. We are learning this ahead of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's meeting with Trump at the White House tomorrow to discuss Ukraine's air defenses and the U.S. potentially sending them long-range missiles. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar has more on that as Trump pressures other countries to stop buying Russian oil.
As Russian President Vladimir Putin refuses to end his invasion of Ukraine, the consensus among leaders in Washington is his main source of revenue to fund the war, energy sales, must be cut off. Easier said than done. President Trump previously threatened to punish countries that purchase Russian oil and gas with massive tariffs.
It's very simple, and they'll be at 100%.
Then walked that back.
Well, I never said a percentage, but we'll be doing quite a bit of that.
Only India, Russia's second biggest oil customer, was hit with a 25% tariff. That was early August. Then, suddenly on Wednesday, President Trump said this about Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
He assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia. That's a big stop. I don't know, maybe that's a breaking story. Can I say that? Would you say? There will be no oil. He's not buying his oil from Russia. It started. You know, you can't do it immediately. It's a little bit of a process. But the process is going to be over with soon.
India is not confirming this.
I'm not aware of any conversation yesterday between the two leaders.
India's External Affairs Ministry issuing a vague statement saying discussions with the U.S. are ongoing.
Putin's revenues must be reduced, and that will increase global security.
Ahead of his meeting with President Trump at the White House Friday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky detailing his pursuit of long-range weapons, which he says will noticeably reduce Russia's fighting capability.
Tools like Patriots and Tomahawks can help lay a long-term foundation for peace.
Before he hosts Zelensky, Trump had a more than 2-hour phone call with Putin Thursday. They agreed to have their senior staff meet as early as next week, and he says that will be followed by a one-on-one meeting with Putin in Budapest, though a date has not yet been set. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Federal immigration officers in Chicago will now be required to wear body cameras. U.S. District Judge Sarah Ellis issuing the order today because she said she was, quote, a little startled after seeing clashes between agents and the public on television. Ellis also ruled last week that agents in the area must wear visible ID badges. Threats on ICE agents have ramped up in the nation's third largest city, according to the Department of Homeland Security. And more than 1,000 immigrants have been arrested since September. Now, separately, the Trump administration has tried to deploy National Guard troops, but of course, that strategy was halted by a different judge last week. The shutdown stalemate continues in its 16th day. Senate Republicans tried something new today, putting forth a bill on Pentagon funding for a year, but needing 60 votes. That vote failed, 50-44. Also, for the 10th time, the Senate vote on the House-passed continuing resolution also falling short with no new support. Democrats insist on health care spending, while Speaker Mike Johnson says the Democrats have slid too far left.
There is a Marxist rise in the Democratic Party, and the old guard, and I'm saying old guard, Chuck Schumer's been here for 44 years, okay? He is not the flavor of the month.
We got a housing crisis, a healthcare crisis, an education crisis, massive income and wealth inequality, a corrupt campaign finance system, and the media says, oh, you're going to run, what are you going to run for?
And the Senate Majority Leader told MSNBC he is more than willing to bring health care subsidies to the floor for a vote, but Democrats need to reopen the government first. Our fact-check team took a look at the history of these subsidies and what it cost.
It's been 15 years since President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act into law, better known as Obamacare, and now subsidies for the ACA are at the center of the government shutdown debate between Republicans and Democrats. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the fact-check team. If we take a look back a few years, I mean, the main goal here, affordability.
Yes, exactly. Main goal was obviously make healthcare more affordable and accessible. Before the ACA, about 50 million Americans didn't have insurance, and people with pre-existing conditions could be denied coverage. So the law just changed that. They expanded Medicaid, gave people their subsidies to help pay their premiums. The uninsured rate actually dropped from 16% to just around 7% today.
But it has also come with a pretty big price tag, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's an unbelievable amount of money when you really look at the numbers here. So the subsidies have grown a lot, from about $50 billion a year in 2020 to more than $120 billion now. Just since COVID, American taxpayers have spent around $440 billion on subsidies entirely. Supporters say, you know, it's worth it. It keeps healthcare affordable, but critics argue that it's unsustainable. They point out that the taxpayers are the ones footing the bill, and premiums for people who are not getting these subsidies can still be really high. So they're concerned about that, you know, the dollar amount that comes with it.
Right, they're astronomical. Emma, thank you. For more on this fact-check team topic, including links to Emma's sources, just scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com.
One of the most significant airlifts in Alaska history. Wednesday, hundreds of people from coastal villages ravaged by Typhoon Halong evacuated to safety. The storm brought strong winds and record-high water levels last week into low-lying communities, washing away homes and decimating some villages. More than 1,500 people are displaced. One person has been confirmed dead, and 2 are still missing. Makeshift shelters were quickly established, but the impacted communities are extremely remote, making them only reachable by air or water.
Yeah, it has really been a Herculean effort to get resources out to the communities to both perform the search and rescue, but also to airlift people out. There are no roads to these communities. So we have to rely on aircraft, and in Alaska with our poor weather, flying can often be very difficult.
And that evacuation process is ongoing, and it's critical as forecasters say more rain and even snow is possible in the region this weekend. The man arrested in connection with starting that deadly Palisades fire in Los Angeles is facing new charges. A federal grand jury indicted Jonathan Rinderneck on 2 additional federal charges. He was already facing 1 charge related to the January fire that decimated the Pacific Palisades area and killed 12 people. The 29-year-old will appear in front of a judge in Los Angeles soon. If convicted of all charges, he's now facing up to 45 years in prison. A new warning from the FDA about elevated levels of lead in various labels of ground cinnamon. So listen up. This week, the agency added 4 new brands to that alert, including Heyte, Roshni, Dura, and Wisewife. 16 labels have now been included in the alert since over the summer. Elevated levels of lead in food can, of course, lead to severe long-term health problems in both children and adults. A full list can be seen on the FDA's website. Oklahoma's Bibles in every classroom mandate has ended. The original effort was spearheaded by former state superintendent Ryan Walters, who resigned 2 weeks ago. And the push for classroom-wide Bibles led to a lawsuit, which is pending. The new superintendent instructed the state Supreme Court that there are currently no plans to distribute Bibles or to add biblical character education to Oklahoma public schools. Coming up, a new show of force inside President Trump's push to end drug trafficking into the United States. Then the mayoral race that's captivating the country. What we know about tonight's New York City mayoral debate. Plus, an IRS shakeup putting its sights on deep-pocketed Democratic donors. The changes that could lead to criminal charges. Escalation in the war on drugs as President Trump makes a daring show of force to stop the trafficking from Venezuela. 3 American B-52 bombers circled near Venezuelan airspace for 2 hours yesterday. This comes as President Trump revealed plans to crack down inside the country, and as the White House says we should expect to see more attacks on Venezuelan boats. National correspondent Christine Frizzell brings us the latest.
For months, U.S. troops and military ships have been making their way to the Caribbean, with growing signs it could mean an impending war with Venezuela in the name of stopping drugs from getting to U.S. shores.
We've almost totally stopped it by sea. Now we'll stop it by land.
President Trump Wednesday confirming this report in the New York Times that he authorized covert CIA action inside Venezuela.
I authorized for 2 reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela, and a lot of the Venezuelan drugs come in through the sea.
One reason why President Trump says he also gave the green light to yet another strike on a boat he says was carrying drugs.
The president is taking these unprecedented steps, and it's making a real impact. We are seeing less boats with lots of drugs coming into the shores of the United States of America as a result of these successful strikes.
Others on Capitol Hill, though, calling for hearings, insisting the White House must legally provide more evidence there are actually drugs on board these boats.
I was a CIA officer and helped with targeting. I have no problem going after these cartels, but we've never had an instance where there's a secret list of what I understand to be dozens of now terrorist organizations that the American public and certainly the oversight committees don't get to know.
The Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro comparing Trump's actions to failed attempts at regime change in places like Afghanistan and Argentina.
Not war, just peace.
Also saying no to coups carried out by the CIA.
How long will CIA coups continue? Latin America does not want them, does not need them, and repudiates them.
Meanwhile, in the United States, the White House immigration crackdown has continued, including in cities like Washington, D.C. and Chicago. This week, the Department of Homeland Security said Mexican cartels had put bounties on the heads of ICE and CBP officers, including $5,000 to $10,000 for kidnappings and $50,000 to kill them. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
And you can participate in our question of the day. Do you agree with President Trump's authorization of CIA operations to combat drug cartels in Venezuela? To weigh in and vote, search for the question of the day at thenationaldesk.com. A stark warning to Hamas today from President Trump concerning the Gaza ceasefire deal. In a post to his Truth Social platform, Trump says, quote, if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. This statement follows a series of recent threats from President Trump to intervene if Hamas does not disarm. Earlier in the week, promising to disarm the terrorist organization quickly and violently if they don't do so themselves. Journalists on the ground in Gaza have reported seeing Hamas back on the streets, still armed and reportedly confronting rival groups. Meanwhile, Hamas is saying that it has handed over all the Israeli hostage remains in Gaza that it can access. They claim extensive efforts and special equipment are needed to recover the remaining bodies. 9 of 28 bodies have been returned. But under the ceasefire agreement, Hamas was supposed to have returned all hostages, living and dead, by this past Monday, October 13th. And as the Gaza peace deal tenuously holds, efforts to rebuild and secure Gaza after 2 years of war are in motion. ABC News is reporting that a U.S.-led coordination center based in Israel will oversee the implementation of the ceasefire agreement. Citing 2 U.S. officials, they say it will become operational in days and will likely be led by an American 3-star general tasked with coordinating security, aid, and rebuilding efforts inside Gaza. President Trump has already sent 200 U.S. troops to the region. In a little more than half an hour, the first of 2 New York City mayoral debates begins, pitting Democratic candidate Zohan Mamdani against Republican Curtis Sliwa and independent candidate and former Democratic governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. Mamdani has been a lightning rod of a candidate this season with his Democratic socialist message both on the left and right of the political spectrum. And possibly because of all that attention, Real Clear Politics aggregate polling shows Mamdani with a commanding 17-point lead over Cuomo, but that also includes earlier polling with a much larger lead. Now, more recent polls indicate that lead has been slightly shrinking since independent mayor and former candidate Eric Adams, of course, dropped out of the race. Some are calling for Curtis Sliwa to also drop out, hoping his support could lift Cuomo over Mamdani come November. Now, also tonight, happening right now at the University of Richmond, the Virginia Attorney General debate between current AG Jason Miyares and Democratic candidate Jay Jones. This race also receiving a lot of national attention since texts by Jones made 2 years ago were leaked earlier this month. The messages included violent and threatening remarks about former Republican House Speaker Todd Gilbert and comments wishing the Speaker's wife and children experience death in order for them to act on gun legislation. Real Clear Politics aggregate polling shows Miyares with a razor-thin lead at the moment, less than 1%. But you should note the trend of polling shows a surge since the texts were made public, making up as much as a 6-point deficit depending on whose specific polling you follow. The Attorney General's race is also having a possible impact on Virginia's gubernatorial race. So let's talk about that. Democrat Abigail Spanberger's aggregate lead over Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears has dropped to single digits since the scandal emerged. Earl Sears has been attacking Spanberger for not calling out Jay Jones to drop out. Former President Barack Obama is throwing his support behind Spanberger, possibly giving her a push, while President Trump has stayed clear and stayed away from the race and has not endorsed Winsome Earl Sears. Well, Nestle, the world's largest food company, is cutting 16,000 jobs due partly to automation. The company's CEO announcing the decision as part of an effort to slash $3.7 billion in spending by 2027. Now, roughly 3/4 of the eliminations are expected to be from managerial or administrative staff. CVS says it has completed its nationwide acquisition of select Rite Aid assets. 63 storefronts and more than 600 pharmacies were acquired by CVS after Rite Aid filed for a second bankruptcy this past May. As a part of the takeover, CVS is adding nearly 3,500 former employees to their staff. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America. We start in Utah, where a man was arrested for making violent online threats over a college football rivalry.
This rivalry is a consistent thing on X. Everyone is, any chance they get to get a jab in, they're getting the jab in.
Ivan, more commonly known as Ute fan Ivan online, grew up a Utah fan. He says everything started when posts from an account called Juices Loose 328 went a little too far.
He said it's not possible to be a good person and a Utah fan.
At first, Ivan didn't interact with the account, and then the comments escalated.
I was planning on going to the game. These things started getting said, and I was like, started questioning. I was like, maybe I shouldn't go.
Ivan and his friends reported the post to police, who say Christopher Ty Justice ran the account. In this affidavit, police say he admitted to the threats.
So these are clearly direct, specific threats that no one would argue about. When law enforcement sees something like that, you act immediately.
Mother Nature has flipped the switch.
It's been 38 days of no rain and low inflow into the Highland Lakes. Now, the levels are starting to drop.
And we've seen, widespread a 2 to 3% decline in water supply storage just in the last few months.
Take a look at this Austin water chart. You can see the purple graph in July showing over 750,000 acre-feet of water pouring into the Highland Lakes. Since then,
and then in August and September, we've had relatively low inflows.
Greg Waller with the National Weather Service says we're supposed to be seeing more rain and moisture in the fall. Instead, the unusually hot and dry conditions during this drought have lowered lake levels with not much rain in sight.
I keep saying hope is not a plan, but in the first week or so, our weather models are suggesting there's not a lot of rain chances out there, but there is a pattern change coming up at the end of the month. So we're hoping that we get back into a more active fall-like pattern for the end of October.
Coming up, the White House wants more control over the IRS, who they could be looking into if they get it. A major shakeup could be coming to the Internal Revenue Service, giving the White House more control over who the agency investigates. but it's raising concerns that the changes will open the door to politically motivated probes. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins joins us with that story from the White House.
The sweeping overhaul of the IRS reportedly put key allies of President Trump in charge of the IRS's Criminal Investigations Division. According to multiple officials, the new leadership already has a list of potential investigative targets, and on that list is billionaire donor activist George Soros and his affiliated organizations.
This plan coincides with a broader White House initiative to scrutinize left-leaning groups that President Trump claims are funding political unrest in Democratic-led cities. The FBI, DHS, Justice Department, and the IRS are now tasked with tracing the financial networks funding what the White House has labeled domestic terror networks. According to the White House, these groups include nonprofits and educational institutions.
In a lot of instances, when you're talking about these activist groups, you're talking about nonprofit organizations that have tax-exempt status. They're oftentimes given money by large grant-giving foundations.
Billionaire activist donor George Soros is perhaps the biggest fish the White House is after. Soros has long backed progressive candidates and policies through his Open Society Foundation. Critics argue his donations also fund violent leftist protests and civil unrest. The Justice Department is urging investigations into Soros's foundations. President Trump has already said George Soros and his son Alex should face federal criminal charges under the RICO Act. President Trump says he's also targeting other left-wing organizations, including Antifa.
But they have been very threatening to people, but we're going to be very threatening to them, far more threatening to them than they ever were with us, and that includes the people that fund them. So we're going to be looking very strongly at the people that are funding these operations.
According to IRS officials, no new criminal investigations have been launched since the leadership shakeup. Reporting from the White House, I'm Kayla Gaskins, reporting for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Coming up, the new color you may see along with black and orange this Halloween and what it means for trick-or-treaters. Two weeks away from All Hallows Eve, and this year you might spot some teal-colored pumpkins on people's porches or at retailers this Halloween season. They're not just a festive decoration. It actually means non-food treats are available for trick-or-treaters with food allergies. Roughly 8% of kids in the United States have a food allergy, according to the CDC. That does it for this edition of the National News Desk. Thanks for watching. I'm Taylor Murray.